in an eon of total galactic war. In an imperium built upon the bones of untold trillions that has sacrificed each and every day for mankind's survival, there are those who look upon the ever-heightening pyramid of skulls and remain unmoved, unfeeling, unsatiated. Cults of warriors that scorn peace, worshipping at the brass altar of a master that promises slaughter and suffering and naught else. Killers cold to everything but the steel of their blades and the agonized screams of their victims. To the decadent and mercifully ignorant, like princelings born on paradise worlds, or nobles cozened in the palaces of an upper hive, this phenomenon would seem impossible, an absurdity that does not deserve entertainment. Some fable spun by haggard veterans of the lower castes, brought home from a front that is beneath notice and memory. But it does merit belief, for it is nightmarishly true. These blood cults do exist, and their cohorts fight and die on 1,000 fronts. Indeed, some even operate under the banners of the Aquila, perversely and secretly dedicating the tally of death wrought against the Imperium's enemies to a patron besides the Emperor. They are men whose thirst for carnage is unquenchable, and if able would siphon the oceans of humanity's blood for the channels of an altar and a ziggurat they deem far superior to the Imperium's own. For an osseous throne they believe in odious madness and blasphemy to be the elder and ultimate reality that eclipses even the Emperor's eternally golden counterpart. They are the worshippers of the blood god Khorne, and their dark lord thunders for unending war. My Vox report concerns those in the Ordos who would seek to unearth the motives of such heretics. How cults of Khorne spread and why. What unutterable madness seizes a man to cause him to yearn for his own and others' reckless deaths, spent in the pit bouts, battles, and feuds that consume their countless blighted souls? What is the mind of such a creature truly like? How does his bloodlust seize worlds? All these questions shall be answered, Emperor, be my witness. So let us invoke the litany of protection and steel our minds against the rage that is sure to arise in us as we delve deep. For to even glimpse into the nature of chaos worship is to allure demons, and there are many that circle our souls even now. In the numberless horrors I have witnessed throughout my years as a servant of his Inquisition, there is perhaps no viler sight than the aftermath of a world rocked by a blood cult's insurgency. I have climbed ramparts of butchery, mountains of corpses erected as walls to defend a heretic trench line. My boots have sunk into the pulped viscera of those blasted apart in the kill zones behind. The crunch and gelatinous slosh of half-clotted blood felt as the carnage overflowed to soak my toes red. Guardsmen and traitor alike lay entirely indistinguishable, for beyond shattered shards of carapace armor and the outline of blasted helms, the bodies of the slain were riven beyond identity. All that remained was the exhibit of humanity's cannibal nature, the darkness of heresy's visage entire. Mankind is most often the architect of our own doom. This fact should not be a surprise or controversy to a member of our orders, for we observe it time and time again. Whether it is to be faced in the innumerable fratricides that have blotted the millennia of our own dark age, or in the original first betrayal of the Emperor by Horus Lupercal, the ground for heresy always lies coiled in our own hearts, for it is stoked and succored on the pangs of our innate and twisted desires. Though the demagogues of the Imperium's exoteric ideology rail against the alien, the mutant, and an abstract demoniac other, in reality, it is we ourselves who bear the burden for our Imperium's plight. Whether we choose to slacken our resolve, heeding the sensuous whispers of the Prince of Pleasure, giving in to rest for but a moment while the Imperium burns, or if we submit to the fear of our own mortality, crying out to the warp to extend or save our lives, thereby inviting noxious possession by the Lord of Flies. It is our soul to give, and no outsider can be blamed for its surrender. But, out of all the dark impulses that afflict humanity, there is one sphere of the soul's discord that bears the least blameworthiness, as mankind has not willingly chosen its agitation. More often than not, the blood cults are its forbidden and worst culmination. Across every endless dimension of space, wherever the Imperium has laid claim, the talons of our enemies rip and tear at our throat. Mankind is perpetually assailed on all fronts, forced into a death struggle that begins at birth. It is the duty of every subject of the Emperor to rage against the dying of the light. From the backwater of feudal worlds where warrior passions burn hot, fostered in tourneys and chivalric duels, to the parade grounds and barracks of advanced Imperial Guard regiments, humanity must tend to the warlike virtues, compelled by the necessity of survival. Indeed, this plight is not just limited to the 10,000 years of suffering our species has endured, despite terror's noble ministrations. It is the underlying experience of all life itself. To be thrown into a world that compels one to take up the knife or die by it. After taking our first breath, we vie against others, pitted in contests of will and daring, expanding ourselves to the loss of our opponents. In all the moments of indignation, hatred, and spite, we can experience the presence of a predator lurking in our midst. Not only in the field of battle where he is most present, but in the fantasies of murder and injury we wish upon our rivals. It is all his working. Indeed, it is his domain. This arena of existence, according to the so-called blood cults, has an owner. It is Khorne. The Imperium serves as the blood god's principal hunting ground, and there are souls aplenty for him to cull. Across uncounted worlds he is offered to, in the haunted jungles of headhunters and manskinners, on the contest fields of a paradise world. Live human and inhuman victims are given up in the gloom on savage altars, hearts ripped from their chests, or jugulars drained of every red drop. Khorne's shrines are everywhere. There are as many motives for an Imperial citizen's descent into Khorne's worship, and as many castes and breeds of men too. Mercenaries, gladiators, chemtraders, organ abductors, gangers, hired thugs, brigands, slavers, primitives, assassins, highborn fencers, any who has tasted death and gambled his life for the thrill of it, feel the snort of the beast on their neck. some surrender to the wicked agitation they have developed. They embrace a life of wild, violent nihilism, and so fall further into Khorne's grip. But the cause for such a downfall can be far humbler. Career killers are not Khorne's only covenanters. The Lord of Skulls finds himself chiefly called upon for all matters of dark satisfaction. Outbreaks of vindictive strife, such as between rival kinsmen seeking to outcompete one another, or in disputes of land ownership waged by agrarian planters. Khorne is there, anticipating the moment where the line is drawn, and someone steps over. When a stone is thrown in anger, or a smuggled las pistol is pulled, if the aggrieved or the aggressor make him their patron, he cares not. Only that they consummate death together, with the defeated skull placed before his infernal likeness, carved from brass or bone. The names and guises this bestial dark god adopts are similarly legion, and can be subtle, making them hard to identify. There are unitary themes, however. To some, he is the Hound, a snarling pack hunter popular among steppe nomads, feudal lords, and aboriginal ice-sled drivers. To others, he is a horned bull, a symbol of tenacity and endurance, venerated by hard-bitten survivors on desertified, barren wastes. It is very likely that the ignorant outside the knowledge of the holy ordos could mistake such minor deities as inoffensive facets of backward cultures. Ministorum missionaries, dispatched to forgotten worlds, driven by a fervor for conversion, might even attempt to syncretize them within the cult of the immortal God Emperor. The warlike zealotry of these religions and their devotees can be impressive, and if controlled by the guiding hand of proselytes, could be used for the Imperium's good. Or so the delusion goes. Perhaps one day they will make for fine soldiers in the Astra Militarum, elevated from the obscurity of a parochial pit, liberated by the Emperor's honor-bound regiments to fight the Imperium's wars across the stars. Such naivety only entrenches and veils the operations of primordial blood cults. If given enough cover under the pretense of barbaric parochialism, they will indeed inseminate their dark creed wherever they are spirited. Conveyed via imperial battleships to far-off wars, or housed as garrisons on beleaguered frontiers. There are innumerable other antediluvian cultures and peoples that offer their sons to take up the Emperor's lasgun after all. Entire regiments of such savages, in fact. If the priests of the ecclesiarchy cannot discern the signs of malefic perversion from the benign, neither can the officers or generals of the Astra Militarum. Thus, it falls to us in the Inquisition to divide the heretic from the orthodox, as it always does. Partly through this impetus I have compiled this vox-article, that you, dear colleagues, may be able to pass the blood cult from a heathen moot. There is a fine line between the two. It is a terrible thing to consign entire regiments to purgation, or entire continents of their native gene lines. Tens of thousands, if not millions of souls, many only incidentally compromised, but sufficiently contaminated by Khornate heresy nonetheless. We can avoid such wastes, if you heed this lesson. A definitive clue can be found in a unique practice of a blood cult. It stands out above any other in peculiarity, and is found within every evolution and every form that the Khornate heresy takes shape as. I speak of mage murder, the desire and invocation to destroy psychers. I have perused colonial surveys and the anthropological reports of explorator fleets that convey this exact phenomenon. usually derived from the distant worlds mostly found outside the Imperium. As is common where psykers are allowed to roam unmolested, there are inevitable grudges, witch hunts, and blood feuds that accrue against them. Let this be an example for you to know. A savage chieftain hexed by one such creature, usually titled as a shaman, warlock, or some other ancient name, calls upon his world or culture's cognate, covert deity of Khorne. Demanding immediate vengeance, he hopes to summon the blood god's flesh hounds, monstrous scaled beasts whose preferred prey are every species of warp dabbler. For Khorne despises magic, and he does so due to the same aversions he holds in common with his invoker. Any means of will outside the axe or the gun are averred as cowardice. The etheric manipulations of court wizards against their warrior lords rouse him especially. Rather than settle a dispute directly and violently, with feats of arms that honor and empower his realm of brass and blood, the magus chooses to forego such a trial of strength. He instead resorts to the connivances of curses and effete rituals, becoming the conduit and pawn of Khorne's rival and brother, Tzeentch. For this reason, psykers are among the most offensive cowards of all to the god of warriors. There is, however, a more hated breed of craven in the minds of those who worship Khorne. For Tzeentch is not the antithesis of the Great Butcher. That infamy belongs to the youngest of the Dark Powers, she who thirsts, the Prince of Pleasure, slithering serpent and lord of excess, Slaanesh. Its worshippers are the arch-rivals of the blood cults throughout the galaxy, and it is Khorne's will that his followers should seek them out and kill them wherever they find them. This is one of the greatest means by which a cultist of Khorne can worship his master. Sectarian bloodshed is accordingly irresistible, and such sudden outbreaks are one of the most crucial signs of how deep the blood cult heresy has taken root. Indeed, the shared presence of such bitter enemies is sure to draw both heretic cults out into the open. If such a disaster occurs, investigative wits must then be replaced by resolute zeal and incisive strategic and tactical planning. But at such a stage, I am afraid the shattering devastation left in the heretic's wake will be irrevocable. It is the nature of chaos to devour itself, and there are no bloodier and more spiteful wars than when the different cults clash across a world, system, or sector. This is doubly true for when the mortal devotees of Khorne and Slaanesh vie for cultic dominance, and infinitely more so when Chaos Space Marine warbands dedicated to either gods collide in apocalyptic Astartes warfare. Needless to say, Astartes war is especially beloved by the Lord of Skulls, for the lethality of the combatants, devotees or no, is near unparalleled. In such engagements, the ecstatic war cries of Khornate prayer echo above any other in the Imperium, serenading the Lord of Skulls for his attentions. When victory is achieved, the greatest of the blood god's champions are festooned with his unholy blessings, bequeathed with unnatural blades possessed by demons, or even elevated to black heights of apotheosis as one of his favoured demon princes. But if stained by the humiliation of defeat at the hands of Slaanesh's slithering hosts, their souls shall be devoured for all time by Khorne's baying hounds, torn apart again and again in undying recompense for their patron's shame. The stakes are infinitely high for any who risk their eternal souls to the Chaos God's enslavement. But for Khorne's warriors, they can be catapulted to even greater heights or depths of experience. For war is the singular truth and reality that spans against the stars. Indeed, it is the worshippers of Khorne who believe that bloody strife is both the cause for being and its end. Renegade Astartes in particular fall victim to Khorne's cult for this very reason. Warrior pride compels them into pacts with his bloodthirsters, or to swear their bolters directly to his throne of skulls. They seek to attain for themselves the infernal relics that furnish the deity's brass horn, or aspire to legend as apex fighters amongst a caste that is already godlike in Warcraft. Fighting is Khorne's theophany, and for beings whose very nature is eternal struggle, there is perhaps no greater master than the one who is war itself. And yet, warfare is not the only sanctioned slaughter of worship for his sake. All means of bloodletting are pleasing in Khorne's eyes. Whether done wordlessly by an assassin's shiv in the night, or brazenly when a convict ambushes his cellmate and cracks open the fool's skull, spilling the crimson wine within. Even the decapitation of his own demons by those who despise the blood god is approved. Any and all violence feeds his infinite hunger. Knowing now the true nature of our adversary, we can go deeper into the unholy mysteries experienced by a blood cultist heretic. How does a mortal man, once having been terrifyingly alike to any of us, walk the eightfold path to damnation? How does the blood god beckon? The nefarious solipsism of a heretic is not innate. It is developed. It would be a mistake to assume that all those who take up the worship of the Chaos gods to be the irretrievably psychotic and broken detritus among the Imperium's masses. Some begin with noble intentions. A pure strain underhiver raised to defend his family, his home, and his hablock from the predations of mutant gangs. A tribal warrior on a primitive deaf world who embarks on the path of a monster hunter at the behest of his village elders. Even an imperial commander of the Astra Militarum who witnesses the deaths of his men before an unbeatable enemy and seeks vengeance, calling upon an intercessor for aid in battle. Whatever the case, these fighters adhere to codes of honor and could have otherwise been saved. They are corrupted by wages that play upon the martial honor and aspiration that comes naturally to them. As example, no warrior can remain at his keenest forever, nor can he mount the universe as its undisputed conqueror. There is always an enemy stronger than you, always a fighter more experienced. Indeed, mortality itself is the greatest adversary. Its trials surmount and the feeble flesh groans. Age saps both corporeal and spiritual strains of vitalism. One confronts the futility of this uphill battle, but does not give in to the cowardice that would lead him to seek the shallow respite of the Plague Father. No, the warrior instead ascends, planting the banner of his will, and fights, defying both the fate that dooms him to die and the enemy who he locks blades with and rives. That is when Khorne's brazen steed, shod in serrated barding and snorting flame, arrives at the gate of the soul. This emissary condescends, not as a slave driver, but as a superior in martial acumen. It extends a gleaming token of its approval, left to be taken. The weapon is offered as a kingly gift, as if bestowed by a feudal monarch to a vassal, or a master's technique recommended to a novice. Little do they know of the consequences that will engulf them for accepting. Perhaps, depending on their exposure to the imperial creed, they mistake this emissary for a wrathful emanation of the emperor, for he too is a patron of warriors. This boon is none other than a minute portion of the blood god's own cosmos-shaking fury, and its allure is tantalizing. For in the sheen of its blade, the warrior sees every triumph that could be his, every destiny won by hard struggle, his highest self eternalized before him as a snare. If this assault of warlike majesty does not capture him, the next vision surely will. Before him will be presented not only his own lifeless cadaver, but the mutilated remains of his clan, his people, and the charred smoking ruins of his home. If he dies here, at this convergence of fate, there will be no guardian to save those who he was sworn to protect. His enemy is innately greater and infinitely more cruel. If he does not assent to the glories offered to him and denies the legend he is destined to fulfill, ruin is his only reward. For himself and all the others that share his life. Through moral vertices such as these, that blur the mundane assumptions of righteousness in the minds of simple, fighting men, the Khornate heresy finally takes root. The impossible victory that is won is the first rapture of a Khornate adept's heretical mystagogy. Where the body should have died, it instead remains, and the killer that was otherwise fated to have won instead lies before them, dead in their place. Thrown into the blood ecstasies of the eightfold path, they drown themselves, lost to the boiling wrath that now glows darkly effulgent within. Little do they know that they have indeed died, but not in body. The champion's soul is now the possession and plaything of the Hound, the Skull-Taker, the Lord of Warriors, and it is his slave to command. Whether it is their hearts that are crushed by the occult weight of brass chains, or the grey matter of their physical brains that feel the demonic hatred, pummeled in by the archaeotech needles of the butcher's nails, these tortures are inflicted by one and the same root oppressor. Such immortal rage that overtakes these warriors is a branding and a curse. Khorne has taken them as his own. Soon the wonders and climaxes of battle and victory will pale before this first gift. The cultist is forever afterward chasing a similar height of experience, seeking even greater challenges, testing themselves against worldly and otherworldly opponents. But they shall never attain unto it again. Instead, their mind becomes increasingly occluded by darkness. The rage that they once felt as liberating is now their jailer. As Khorne reigns as the cosmic chief tyrant, so do the greater among his acolytes. Apoplexies of spite and thoughtless frothing anger will cause the warrior to kill those closest to them. Fast friends and comrades, once beloved, will die in horrifying ways by their hand, their heads taken and mounted together as offerings to the enemy that now rules them within. Where once there was a hero, now stands a monster, a beast of baiting and spectacle, trapped inside a spiritual arena they shall never escape, even after death. Either they will die a failure and suffer the unending tortures of demons, or they shall themselves become tormentors, Khorne's lesser demons, his bloodletters, and terrorize mankind ever afterward in warp-spawned nightmares and war. Alas, these noble but savage tragedians are in the minority of Khorne's slaves. Those who make unknowing or unwilling bargains due to crises of conscience or heroic dreams are outnumbered by the feral murder fiends and packs of sadists that crowd tunnels throughout a single underhive. The blood cults that proliferate deep within these umbral hells are far more deterministic in origin. They are a consequence of the Imperium's grinding bureaucratic waste and neglect. Orphans of war, swept up in the dragnets of abductors, are thrown into charnel pits, slick with offal and spilt stims. They battle for no higher cause but their master's perverse bloodlust, and soon, inured and dulled to all life outside the rush of adrenaline and the cries of pain wrenched from the lungs of their prey, these boys grow into the archetype Khorne truly represents. A soulless, twisted slayer of men, whose sense of self never even had the chance to begin. Beneath the chivalric pageantry many warriors seek to wear as a cloak, thinking themselves saints of the sword, a truth lies buried. Khorne simply seeks its unearthing. They are killers, nothing more, nothing less. So say the blood cults, and they initiate those who embrace this realization with mirth. Such a blunt and direct answer of rhetoric is the only apologia deployed by Khorne's worshippers. None can deny its effectiveness, as the intended audience of fighters appreciate laconic simplicity, not the winding vicissitudes of a sophist. Indeed, the killer's craft appears as the truth itself to such men, pure, guileless, and absolute. What can stand before an annihilator? The blade and the bullet decide reality. The champions of Khorne needn't believe this, for they know it by act and act alone. No argument proves to be a killing weapon, nor some article of malefic theology contrived by the more cerebral strains of Chaos cultist. The Khornate cult spread their twisted faith through propaganda of the deed. Any who witness the truth of their might are bowed. Those who appear before their blades are destroyed, struck from the cosmos in gory finality, and the worshipper of Khorne stands atop the eviscerated corpse of his enemy in triumph. The cultist's will to exist is proven and demonstrated as the truly real. His opponent's head is taken, offered as testimony to this truth. But perhaps you are seeking a concrete, macrocosmic consequence to the Imperium that emerges from this savagely heretical philosophy. What happens when bands of such madmen collect together on a world and emerge from the hidden delves of subterranean skull shrines coated in blood? A world's betrayal to the forces of heresy rarely has an overtly evil starting point. Practically always it is those presiding rulers entrusted with the enormity of power in the planetary government who are the most liable for its downfall. Either out of laxity, sloth, degeneracy, or over-exaction, their vices bury them alongside their own people in the mass graves that will be made of their worlds. It is said that the planetary governor who ruled had a harem of tens of thousands. Such a practice of concubinage certainly raised eyebrows among the imperial representatives present on Earth, but its oddity was passed off as a facet of both the governor's piety and the planet's ancient heritage. The charlatan claimed such a commandment was impelled on him by the emperor in a dream. A revival of a holy, forgotten custom lost to time, and the bobbing, bejeweled mitres of the local bishops in the ecclesiarchy affirmed its revelation in a council. No doubt they were convinced by an estimable donation to their estates. Through such corruption, the governor's dynasty became a caste unto itself, for he, having spawned to his name unending cohorts of allowed them to serve as his tithe collectors. Together, this profligate family exploited all those beneath them with a grasping hand, but they were right enough to remain careful. just enough to sustain an otherwise impossible regime for upwards of a century. Ultimately, the exorbitant taxes and scandals of decadence that spread from the court of the planetary governor proved too flagrant to bear for the people of The excesses crested into the height of outrage after an inexcusable affront. Multiple cadet branches of the governing dynasty were exposed as the patrons of unnumbered trafficker rings, abductors operating from the lower hives. Generations of the vulnerable had vanished, unnoticed in the impoverished industrial wastes throughout. But gradually, these disappearances crept into the middle and even upper tiers of the capital's concentric hab districts. The whispers that followed these disappearances grew to a dirge, and finally, the rumors were proved true. The defiled body of a well-loved healer and seeress of a popular cult of the Emperor Merciful was unearthed, its cadaver shown to the people by a guilt-ridden slave chained to the house of So began the typical escalations of a hive world's political upheaval. Spiraling convulsions of mob violence that begin in the most beggared zones of urban squalor, and then extend even into the respectable fabricated communes that house imperial labor. The underhives of such worlds produce the most vicious swarms, entire armies of chem-fueled, suicidal vagabonds, ghosts of forlorn men that have absolutely nothing to lose, and so die in droves, cut down by enforcer salvos, or that they might make their oppressors feel a modicum of the same agony they have endured throughout the nightmare of their lives. The spy lens-studded precinct fortresses of the Adeptus Arbites are the first to feel the wrath of these baying mobs. Among the hordes that storm their walls, the most bellicose and aggressive prove their talent for violence, and thereby ascend to become the rebellion's masters. They lead the charge against the Pax Imperialis, enacting total slaughter as they break through the choke points of the Arbites' defenses, putting every last hated stronghold of the Lex to fire and ruin. These warriors are not lone individuals, but cells of butchers and marauders that have soaked their fists in blood since childhood, fighting gang wars in the lightless sewers below. The pressure applied by these insurgents, enacted in the desperation of loyalist armories and the terror bombings of governmental buildings and key logistical depots, achieves a crucial objective for the heretics. The impotence of the Imperial boot is shown. It has yet to fulfill its promise to crush the uprising. The Imperial propaganda blared from governmental voxcasters, affixed on every Gothic edifice throughout the middling and upper hives, becomes parodical. Indeed, many among the desperate masses begin to whisper the heresy that this is the end of the old regime. Through this demoralization, elite battalions of soldiers sworn to the Emperor finally begin to defect. PDF troopers, disgruntled by the neglect and ill treatment of their paymasters, recognize an opportunity to exert their wrath against them. Such well-equipped militants are welcome to join the so-called liberationist cause, but under a certain condition. They are compelled by the strongest marauders to damn themselves with grisly packs in order to prove their loyalty to the cause. The PDF initiates are made to scrawl skull-like sigils on captured Arbites enforcers, before being commanded to ruthlessly behead the wretches in spontaneous and grotesque rituals. The blood that flows from the stumps of their necks is collected in bowls, offered as oblation at the idols of a terrifying, dog-headed beast. This new patron is finally unveiled and regaled to the people as their savior. For he is a god of strength, one that will infuse their arms with the power to break the chains of the oppressor and free their world from the tyranny of the planetary governor. Those who dissent at these atrocities are quickly overcome and offered as sacrifices before the same altars. These reactionaries are denounced as cowards and sympathizers of the old regime, unwilling to embrace the revolutionary fervor that is necessary to do what needs to be done. In order to not alienate the worker syndicates and well-wishers that supply and facilitate the blood cult's guerrilla war, a pernicious lie is spread, alongside the natural reign of terror that accompanies it. The masses are told the dog-headed lord is but a wrathful dimension of the emperor, one that manifests when the injustice of rulers threatens to break the backs of the ruled. Under such a foul and contemptuous delusion, the pathetic and the cowardly have their consciences veiled and their palms opened. The heretics, knowing and unknowing, all now stand and watch as pious servants of the Imperium have their throats slit like animals, and cheer as the final testament to the Dark God's power is broadcast across their world. After a year of siege, the curtain walls and minor keeps of the planetary governor's fortress palace, heaped with the dead and dying, are finally overcome. The bastions are detonated triumphantly in a mad display of destruction, leveled before the swarms of the insane and the disheveled that spill up from the underhives in feverish ecstasy. With the Imperial fight hopelessly lost, and the planetary governor's gambit to stall the encroaching heresy in hope of a relief force's descent from the stars above proved as folly, his bodyguard betray him. They opened the gold-plated Aquila-mounted gates, inaugurating the rule of the blood cults, dooming their world to the next stage of the heretics' tortuous and gruesome nightmare. All that survives of the prior world is contained in the frantic, impassioned pleas for aid that haunt the astropathic relays of surrounding systems. The eerie, warp-born echoes of terror reverberate across the stars, being but one tiny petition among countless others sent during the death throes of similarly benighted Imperial worlds. Nevertheless, the ghost of the eviscerated governor will be answered by the Leviathan of the Adeptus Terra, eventually. When the first Imperial Navy transport flotillas arrive, bearing formations of guardsmen numbering in the millions, carrying manifold war machines, tanks, and trains of artillery, the fleet's auspexes read out what awaits the Emperor's own soldiers below. The ferrocrete tangles of hives, already fatal to assault, towering in the atmosphere, or penetrating the darkest hell beneath the world's crust, have been terribly changed. They are all now continent shelves of razor wire. The two poles of the world have been joined, bonded by the cancerous geometric growths of silo blisters, gunnery towers, and iron fastnesses that bristle with immense and deadly orbital batteries pulled down catastrophically from the void. Every last resource left over from the tithe owed to the Administratum has been harvested untoward this end. The mineral treasure of a planet plundered to render a hive world's death trap to be infinitely more deadly. A population of tens of billions enslaved within foundries, refineries, and mines, churning out the armaments necessary to equip the blood cult's savage, berserker armies. All as a welcome to the unlucky souls condemned to charge its endless redoubts and trench lines. A hell realm that will bleed both its native population and the invaders to mutual exsanguination. From orbit, the fleet's admiral can make out an uncanny sigil, wrought intentionally from the millions of new cyclopean fortifications that his eyes regard with horror. All have been erected since the blood cult's ascension to power. The world itself is an altar, its apse centered on a gleaming brass citadel, that now looms atop the ruins of where the planetary governor's palace once stood. The terrible truth dawns in his mind. They are the sacrifice. Such is the story of a planet murdered by the worshippers of Khorne, liberated after 5 decades of grinding, attritional, unholy war. I walked amidst its ruin, and knew the blood-cold enemy by its ghastly, mutilated fruits. A burning pit of skulls, corpses, and death, naught else. Such a planetary husk will not be the last sacrifice offered to he atop the throne of skulls. The myriad other blood cults that coagulate all throughout the dark and vicious places of our Imperium are sure to attempt more. Only through the remedy of counteracting violence can their heresy be stemmed, but even then, the Emperor's victory only invites new challenges, and the defeated cultist's spattered blood is the elixir of Khorne's life, for he cares not from whom or whence it flows, only that it flows. Thus, we are caught in a conundrum. Even the most piously dogmatic servants of the Inquisition have grappled with this paradox. By destroying our Khornate enemy, we seem to fuel him, as if we were trapped together in a circular hell. No few keen minds have drawn the parallels of the blood cult menace to the green skin plague, for as soon as we have decapitated one monster's head, 1,000,000 others appear to bloom. While the orcs are spawned from a naturalistic fungal contagion, Khorne's warriors are born from every swing of the sword, from every blow dealt in malice. Viscera itself seethes as the blood god's potentia, and when it is aired in shining arcs, released by a knife's edge or a stubborn's bark, it is as if one could hear the trumpeting brass sounding from beyond. The deathly art of Khorne is inescapable. War is inescapable. One can only consign themselves to the reality of mankind's struggle. We are caught in an Ouroboros of death. Khorne's gaping canine maws, slavers, and howls after us. How could one wield the monster against itself?